Good morning, guys.
Good morning, sir.
My screen is visible to all of you, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's start this today's session. And today we are going to discuss how to cancel a long-running task, right? Suppose you perform one asynchronous operation, right? You call one async method, which is taking more than expected time, and you want to cancel the that task execution in middle, right? For example, you want you call one async method, right? That method you want, if it is not completed within 5 seconds, then please cancel that execution of that method, right? And how we are going to implement this in .NET framework. And for that, what we are going to use? We are going to use cancellation token, right? So basically, there is a class called cancellation token source, right, available in .NET framework. And using that cancellation token source class, we are going to implement, right, that is, right, we are going to implement some logic, right? We are going to use that cancellation token source class to implement, right, that functionality which is going to cancel the execution of a long running task, right? So before understanding this thing, let us first try to understand the cancellation token source class, right? So if you go to the definition of this cancellation token source class, right? So go to the definition. See, you can see there are three overloaded constructor of this class, right? One is not taking any parameter, right? In this case, you just need to create a cancellation token source object, right? And the one cancellation token source taking parameter in time span in delay, right? What exactly it means? Now, if you specify some milliseconds, after that millisecond or after that second, whatever may be the time you provided to this constructor, right? After that time period, it is going to cancel the execution of that method. Even you can also specify, right, the time in using the integer milliseconds, right? So you have these three options, right? Three overloaded constructor to create an instance of this class. Once you created the instance, right, then you can see there are two properties. One is a token property, and once you create the instance, and this token property actually going to return me a cancellation token. You can see the return type is cancellation token, and each cancel requested means what? Now, once you call this property, right, then it will check whether the user requested the cancellation or not, right? For example, if you said the cancellation is going to be going to be yes, please cancel the execution after 5 seconds, right? Within 5 seconds, if you call this property, it is going to return you false. And once 5 seconds time period is over, right, then it is going to return you true. Once it return true, then you can cancel the execution. And this token is basically going to return a cancellation token. And using this cancellation token, right, we are actually this cancellation token is actually going to cancel the operation, right? The async method, we need to the async method what we have created, right? To that async method, we need to pass this cancellation token. How we can pass the cancellation token? See, once we create an instance, right? And on that instance, we need to call this token property, right? And this token property will return me cancellation token, and that cancellation token we need to pass. And there is another method, you can say cancel. It is going to cancel the operation, and cancel after or cancel after, right? Suppose you are using this overloaded version where you do not specify the time, right? After how many seconds or milliseconds the execution should be cancelled, right? And in that case, if you want to cancel the operation, right, then you can call this method, right? Call this method on the instance of cancellation token source and set the time period, right, when the execution is going to be cancelled, right? Even you can specify using time span, and you can specify using what? Using milliseconds delay, right? And this operation basically what will do, what you need to do. Now, once you check this is cancel requested property and once they return true, that means the time period is elapsed, right? How many seconds you specified? Right, 5 seconds you specify. After 5 seconds, this property is going to return you what? It will return true. In that case, you need to call this cancel method, or and ideal scenario is you need to call this cancel by throwing one exception. And as you can see, it is implementing iDisposable interface. iDisposable interface means what? Now it is implement the dispose pattern, right? So it implement the dispose pattern means what? Now you can see there are two overloaded version, pull disposing and dispose. So once you use the cancellation token source, right, it is always good and suggested to call this dispose method, so that whatever the cancellation token resource is created, that is going to be destroyed, right? Let us see all these things practically, step by step, how to implement these things, right? So how to use this cancellation token means what? You need to create an instance, right? And as I told you, so you have two options, right? What are the options? Now, while creating the constructor, you can specify the time. And if you do not specify the time while creating the construct, while creating the instance of this one, after creating the instance, you can call this cancel after method, and you can specify the time, right? When the token is going to be cancelled and when the execution is going to be cancelled. See, I am using the overloaded version, which is not taking any parameter at this moment. So I am creating an instance. After creating an instance, I'm calling the cancel after method. And this method, I'm passing integer milliseconds in delay, right? Integer milliseconds delay. And I'm passing 5,000 means what? It is going to cancel the operation after 5 seconds, right? Next, you can see this is our asynchronous method, right? And this asynchronous method, I want to pass this cancellation token, right? I want to pass this token property. Then what is the type of this token? Cancellation token. So you can see my asynchronous method, right? What I'm going to cancel after a time period, it is taking a cancellation token, right? So to this method, while I'm calling this method, what I need to do is I need to create an instance. I need to set the time period when this token is going to be it's going to be expired, and then I need to call this property, right? I need to call this property, and whatever this property will return, that I will pass, right, to this method. And you can see in this method, what I'm trying to do is I'm just checking if token is cancelled requested, right? So you can see is cancellation requested. This is the property, right? And this property, it is going to check if the cancellation requested is started or not, if the user is requested for the cancellation or not, right? If the user not requested, this property is never going to return you true, right? If the user requested, then it will check the time period, right? Whether that 5 second or 2 second, whatever, right? The user specify that time period elapsed, yes, elapsed, then this property is going to return true. And if this property return true, right, as a standard of asynchronous programming, what exception you need to throw from this method means task cancelled exception, right? The task cancelled exception you need to throw from this method, right? So this is the process that you need to follow, right? Then how to call this a long, say, this is your method implementation is done. This is the long running task. This task is going to be run for indefinite time, right? Run means what? It might be going to run for more time, right? I will show you practical this thing. But how to call that method means, first of all, you need to create an instance of a cancellation token source. Then you need to set the time period when this method is going to be expired. I'm setting here 5,000 milliseconds. You can also use the time span to specify how much seconds, right? And then as this method is going to throw some exception, right, task cancelled exception. So while I'm calling this method, I need to put that logic within the try catch block, right? So you can see within the try block, I'm calling the long running task. I'm using the await operator, so that once it call this method, the thread will be released, right? And the thread going to do some other task, right? And when this task completed, then thread will come to this place and continue the execution of the rest of the code, right? And then you can see to this method, I'm passing whatever the instance I created, I'm passing the token properties, right? And if this method completed successfully within the time period 5 seconds, right, that is fine, no issue. But if the execution taking more than 5 seconds, right, then at that time, this method is going to throw me one exception, right? And I'm handling that exception within the catch block. So which type of exception this method throwing? Task cancelled exception, right? What is the type of this catch block? What is the exception type? Task cancelled exception. If you do not know the task cancelled exception, then you can use the parent exception class. That is also fine, right? Let us put all these things together inside our code and let us try to observe these things once more, right? So this is my sum method, right? You can see the execution started. I'm calling this sum method from the main thread, and you can see this sum method is a asynchronous method. But here I'm not using await keyword because here I'm using the void return type, right? If I'm using task, then you can use await keyword. But as the return type is void, so I can simply call this method, right? Then you can see I'm creating a counter variable 10, and this counter variable I will pass the asynchronous another asynchronous method where the loop is going to execute this number of a time, right? Then you can say I'm creating a cancellation token source. I'm calling the cancellation after method by passing this 5,000. So this means this method is going to be expired, right? The execution is going to be the token, right? The token what is I have on this cancellation token source, right? The token is going to be expired after 5 seconds, right? Then what I'm trying to do, I'm calling this long running task by passing the count property and by passing the cancellation token. See what this token property is going to return? It is going to return me the cancellation token, right? This is the important, right? This cancellation token I'm passing from this method. And if the execution not completed within 5 seconds, then it is going to throw me one error, right? Then then the statement is going to be printed that some method execution is completed. And this is my long running task. This is the count variable. What is I'm passing? What value I'm setting? 10, right? That means the loop is going to run now for 10 times, right? So I equals to 1, I less than equals to 10, I plus plus, right? Then what I'm doing here, here I'm calling one external API, right? I'm calling one external API, and for that purpose, what I'm trying to do is I'm delaying the execution by 1 second, right? Then what I'm saying, the long running task is processing, and after then I'm checking whether the each cancellation requested, right? Each cancellation requested means 5 seconds is completed. Yes or no? If 5 seconds is completed, then within the 5 seconds, if the execution of this method is not done, then throw task cancelled exception, right? And then I'm here using stopwatch, and using stopwatch, I'm just printing how much time this method takes for processing, right? And if it is completed within 5 seconds, right, this statement is going to be printed, right? And it will show how much time this method took for processing. If it is taking more than 5 seconds, then you will never see this statement. Why? Because from here it is going to throw the exception. As soon as it throw the exception from this statement, rest of the statement in this method is never going to be executed. From this statement, the controller will move to this one, and from here it is going to catch by the catch block. Right? Now, let me run the application. See, long running started processing, and then you can see after processing, oh my God. Okay, let me run once more. See, after processing, I'm getting a task was cancelled, right? That means what? Now, after processing some time, the task was cancelled, and that task cancelled exception is caught by this method, right? So if you run this application, right, after processing for 5 seconds, right, the task was cancelled, and that cancelled or whatever the exception that we have thrown, that is cast by this catch block, right? So let me type F10, right? So once I type F10, you can see a task was cancelled exception I'm getting here, right? So this is how you need to cancel the exception. This is how you need to cancel the execution of an asynchronous method. Now instead of for 10 seconds, right, 5 seconds, I have specified 50, right? That means it will wait for 50 seconds, right? And within 50 seconds, if your program execution completed now, then this is fine, right? And we know that the method execution will take a little more than 10 seconds because the loop is going to execute for 10 times. And each time the loop execute, I'm delaying the execution for 1 second. So you can see now I'm not getting any exception and the loop execution is completed successfully, right? So basically now it is on your hand, right? When you want to cancel the execution of a task, and if you do not want to cancel the execution of a task, right, then don't use this cancellation token source at all. If you want to cancel the execution after some time period, then only you need to go and use this cancellation token source. Is that clear, guys?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And as I mentioned, these two statement you can use using a single statement, right? Let me also show that. So here what I'm trying to do, I'm specifying this cancel after some seconds, right? So instead of that, what I can specify the time period here, right? So in this case, you can see I'm specifying the integer milliseconds. See, I'm using the overloaded version, which is taking milliseconds in delay, right? Now, if you run the application, then again, you will see after 5 seconds, the execution is going to be cancelled.
So this property, by checking this property and by throwing exception only, we are stopping it. So there is no other means, is it?
No. See, why I'm throwing this by manual means, see, practically, okay, you just tell me practically here what we are doing. So practically, if you speak practically, so here we are manually doing these things, right? But in real time, so we are not going to do this thing, right? In real time, we are going to call some third-party APIs, right? I'll show you that practically. So for practically showing the thing I'm using this thing, right? But if you are going to call one HTTP request, right? In that case, whatever method you are going to use, right? You just need to pass the request token to that API, right? That API is going to handle the things internally. We are not going to throw the exception and we are not going to check whether the cancellation requested is happening or not. This thing we are manually doing this thing. But in real time, what is your real time requirement? So in this case, whatever the delay we are doing, so in this statement, we are not going to write the logic, right? So in that case, we are just calling the web API, right? External API, you are just calling. That external API, right, for calling purpose, we are going to use some mechanism. That mechanism, we just need to pass the cancellation token, right? That's it. So what we need to do, we just need to pass this cancellation token. Rest of the things will be taken care by that method. If you want to manually do this, then you have to do this. I will show you that practically, right? So in this case, you can use any of the method, right? Cancel after 500 seconds, or you can pass the time period to this method, right? Even if you want, you can use the other overloaded version, right? What is time span? Dot from seconds, from milliseconds, from hour, whatever you want, you can use, right? So these are the three overloaded version that is available to create an instance, right? So if you are using this one, then this method is not required because you are specifying the time period when the cancellation token is going to expire, right? So this is fine. Now, as he mentioned, do we need to write these things manually? Absolutely not, right? Let me show you one real-time example where we are going to communicate with an external API, right? So for that purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one web API project, right? Right. So this is one web API project I have created, right? And you can see this is the application which we have working so far, right? This is the web API application. In this application, I'm having a method called get greetings, right? So in this get greetings method, right, the signature is that you can access this method by using, see, what is the signature? The template is API controller, right? API controller and ID. So, but in this case, we are using attribute routing, right? So if anybody having any experience of web API, then they might know this is the concept of attribute routing. Using attribute, we can specify the route. So in this case, the route is API slash greeting slash some name parameter you need to pass, right? And once you pass this thing, right, then this method is going to be invoked, right? Let me run this one. right? So you can see API. Okay, let me copy the things from here. API slash greeting slash name. Name. So I'm using double quote. So in the place of a name, which is created using open and close curly braces. So in this case, you can pass any string. So I'm passing Pranaya, right? So in this case, you can see that API is going to be hit, but as you see here, we have delaying the execution of this method by 500 milliseconds. So you will get the response after 5 seconds. So you can see I'm getting this response. Hello, welcome to hello Pranay, welcome to AVP. Now, what is my requirement? I want to call this method from my application. This is my external application. From my application, I want to call this web API, right? And what is my requirement? If I'm getting the response in 4 seconds, then that is fine. If I'm getting the response in 4 seconds, then that is fine. If I'm not getting the response in 4 seconds, then I'm going to cancel the execution. And in this case, you can see you are delaying the execution of this method by 5 seconds. So definitely this method execution going to take little more than 5 seconds. So how you can implement this? For that, in that case, you can see this is the code. This is the source code. And this source code control you do not have. You do not have the control what I've written inside this method, right? Then how you can do this, right? In that case, you do not have control over this. So here you cannot check the token is cancelled or not. Let me throw that exception. This thing you cannot do because this source code is not available to you. This is developed by some other companies, right? They are only providing the API signature. Hey, you want to consume my API? This is my API signature. You have to call this way, right? This is the header, right? This is the body. You have to pass this thing, that thing, and then you will get the output, right? This is the only signature you know. But what code they have written as part of this method that you do not have any idea, right? Then in that case, so then in that case, you cannot implement these things. So you cannot check whether the token is expired or not, the cancellation request is coming or not. You cannot throw this thing because the source code is not available, and whatever code they have written, they also don't know. Then how you can do this? For that purpose also, right? We are going to use cancellation token. See how we are going to do, right? See, in this case, what I'm trying, I'm calling this some method. I'm passing some value gems, right? So in this case, what I'm doing, I'm creating an instance of a cancellation token source. And to this token source, I have specified 4000. Means what? The token is going to expire after how many seconds? Right?
4 seconds.
4 seconds, right? So this is my base address 51546. I just copy the base address, right? And I just paste it here. So you have to check this thing, right? What is your local host address that you need to copy paste it, right? And then you can see in the try method, I'm writing some statement, some method calling web API, right? And here, and you know how to call a client, right? So what I'm trying to do, I'm creating an instance of HTTP client, right? So here you can see I'm creating an instance of HTTP client. By HTTP client class, you can access the external APIs, right? Whether that API method, right? Whether that resource is a get resource, put resource, right? Delete resource, post resource, any resource you can access. How? Now you have to create an instance of this class. To the base address, you have to set the URI, that is the base address of the API. Then you have to use that client, right, that base address, and you have to call the method. So which type of a resource? This one. This is a get resource, put resource, or post resource. This is a get resource. So because why? Now I'm decorating this method with the HTTP get for, so it is going to be get resource. So what, and as it's then what I'm trying to do is I'm going to call this method, and I'm going to call this method by using the method get async, right? Like get async, you can see there are many overloaded versions. Get async, right? Then you can see delete async. Then you can see some put async. There is some method called post async, right? So basically what I'm trying to make you understand is I'm calling the get async. I'm using get async method here because the API what I'm going to consume is a get API. And if the API is a put API, then you have to use put async. If the API is a post API, then you have to use post async, right? And then the first parameter, if you look at this method, right, what I'm using here, a request URI. The first parameter is the request URI, and the second parameter is what? Cancellation token, right? So what it means first parameter is the request URI. So base address we have already set. After the base address, what we need to set? We need to set these things. API greetings and whatever the value you want to pass. So that is what I'm setting here, right? I'm using the dollar symbol means this name property will be replaced with its appropriate value. So API greetings this. And the second parameter, what it required? It required the second parameter it required is a cancellation token. Now you tell me, you have the cancellation token source. Which property is going to give you the cancellation token? Which property is going to give you the cancellation token?
Is cancelled requested.
This property is going to give you the cancellation token. What is the return type of this property?
Boolean.
Then how it is going to give you the cancellation token?
It will give only cancelled or not. Okay.
Yes, which property is going to give you the cancellation token? What it is expecting? It is expecting an instance of cancellation token, right? From this class, you can see which property return type is going to be cancellation token.
Token properties.
Token property. That means once you create an instance of this class, and when you call this token property is going to return me the cancellation token. That means here, once you specify the URI, the second property should be what? The cancellation token source dot token. This is what I'm passing here. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. Then once I call the method, right, whatever response, it is going to return me HTTP response message. And from this message, I just need to read the content, right? Then this response variable having one property called content, and whatever content I have to read those things, and that message in this case, it is returning a string. That string I'm storing in this variable, and then I'm printing that. And if the request, if within the time period what I'm specified, right? If the this method, right, is not get the response from the API, right? Then this get async method, what provided to us by this HTTP client class, all the logic have been written inside this method, right? This method will take care everything within 4 seconds. Within 4 seconds, if the API not get return the response, then this get async method is going to cancel the execution, and this get async method is going to throw the task cancelled exception, and that task cancelled exception is going to be captured by this catch. See, so here we are not writing any logic to cancel the exception. This method, what they are provided as part of HTTP client, or the logic is already written inside that method, right? Now, if you run the, if you do not know whether which type of exception this method is trying to throw, simply remove this. You can simply use the exception class, that is also fine, right? So now let me run this application and show you the output. Okay, some method started, some method calling web API, and the task execution cancelled. A task was cancelled. Why? Because you know the API is going to take little more than 5 seconds. And what time period you have set here? 4000 milliseconds, means 4 seconds. So within the 4 seconds, the execution is not going to be completed. This is the reason why it is throwing the exception. Clear? Now instead of a 4 second, let me put this as a 10 seconds. So in 10 seconds, the execution is going to be completed. Yes, it is going to be completed, right? So what it will do, it will run the application, and then it will complete the execution without any kind of exception. And you can see we are getting the output this time. Why? Because we are saying 10 seconds. So the what this put get async method will try to do, it will wait till 10 seconds to get the response. If it get the response in between in less in 10 seconds, then that is fine. Then in that case, it is getting the response in 10 seconds. So it is not canceling the execution. And in that case, we are getting the response as expected. Clear or any question?
Sir, it's clear. In case of client get async, after that you mentioned we need to pass URI, no? So URI means only excluding the base address.
Yeah,
You just
you have already set the base address here. No? You just need to pass the URI.
means URI means only like what
URI
is
means unique resource identifier, right? Suppose what it means in this case, okay. Suppose right? So in this case, this is one URI, right? Like this, you can create multiple. So API, API. So greetings. So your hello, right? Hello. You can pass some name, right? Here, right? So in this case, you can set this as a hello greetings, right? So basically what it means, now this is one URI, the base address is going to be same, right? This is one URI which is uniquely identify this resource. This is another URI which uniquely identify this resource, right? Now, if you want to call this resource, right, hello, hello, greetings, right? Then in that case, you need to use this URI. If you want to access this resource, then you have to use this URI. So URI means unique resource identifier. That is uniquely identify a particular resource. And from the RESTful services, right, resource means nothing but your method, right? Whatever method you created, that is nothing but your resource. And any method you need to uniquely identify, right? There should not be two methods with the same resource, right? For example, in this case, okay, let me give you one idea. Suppose I write these things, right? Now, if you look at this signature, right? This signature and this signature, both are same or different?
same?
Same. Even though your method name is different, but both are having the same signature, same URI or not. So in this case, if you try, then what will happen? You will get some error, right? Let me run this application. Right. Now, if I try, let me run this application also. See what exception we are getting. Multiple actions were found that match the request, right? So that basically whatever the URI you are now passing, that found multiple resources, right? So you cannot handle it, cannot handle that, right? So URI means it should be uniquely identify a particular resource. So in this case, this URI having for two resources, for that purpose we are getting the exception. Clear?
Yes. And while running this application, the web API application always should be running. Only then it will
Yes,
give
yes.
that out.
See. If your application is not running, then how you can consume that? The API application should be running, right? If not running, then how you can consume the things, right? So this is the reason why whenever you are developing some API application, you need to host those API on the server, right? And on the server, it is always going to be in running mode. And if your server is down, then you cannot access the services,
Okay.
right? Any question from anyone? Guys, is that clear?
Clear.
Okay. And this cancellation tokens is what I have explained here, right? The same thing I'm going to use in parallel programming also, right? Suppose in parallel programming, I'm executing some task parallelly, right? And in between, if I want to cancel the execution, then again, I can make use of this cancellation token, right? So don't think this is a very difficult task to understand cancellation token. Why? People are thinking that cancellation token means it's a very big thing, right? Understanding the cancellation token is very difficult, but believe me, this is very easy. Nothing is there, right? So if you understand what is a class, how to create an instance of a class, how to call the properties, then that's it. And if you understand how to do these things manually, then you can easily understand this get async method where you are passing the cancellation token. So whatever logic we have shown previously, right, means what? You have to check the properties, right? And then you have to check whether the execution is completed or not, right? Like this property we have written, right? If you understand this thing, then this logic is all implemented behind the scene of those async method, which is taking cancellation token as a parameter, right? Now, if you go to this method, right, apart from get async, which is taking cancellation request parameter, right, you are having some other thing is there, right? Request URI, right? So you can see the request URI is only there, which is not taking any cancellation token, right? You can have only request URI, right? So once you learn ASP.NET Web API, right, then you will understand these things very clearly, right? What is delete method, right? What is get method, right? What is post method, and what is put method, right? So anyone having any experience on this Web API concept? Anyone having any knowledge of ASP.NET Web API?
I mean, it's like I have used the
No,
consumed the
I'm not talking from the use point of view. I'm talking from the development point of view.
no, sir, I don't.
That is important. So
Yeah, I
in
have some.
yeah, from use point of view, I told you this is the use case, right? You have to create an instance. If you are using HTTP client, you have to use HTTP client. You have to set the base address. Any HTTP request header, right? That you want to pass, that you can pass using this request header parameter, right? And then you have to, if it's a post request, then whatever body you have to convert that body to JSON string, right? Then you have to convert those as a part of your post request, right? So this HTTP content you need to convert, and this is the use case is not that typical. Use case is just like a method calling, right? But the important thing is the development. And as a developer, as a .NET developer, it is the mandatory thing nowadays, right? If you want to become a .NET developer, right, then you should know what is a web API, because most of the time .NET developer, they are going to develop this kind of things, right? And anyone who interested to learn ASP.NET Web API, right? Step by step, I mean what? I have created a tutorial, right? They can just visit this Web API link, right? I'm explaining from the basic to the advanced level concept, right? How to where to and how to implement all these things, right? Just have a look parallelly, because now you have almost learned the basic concept, and the concept which are required for to learn the framework you have already learned, right? Now it's time to keep focus on other things as well, right? We have understand the hooks concept, we have understand exception handling, we have understand the concept called what? Uh, concept called collection framework. We have understand multi-threading, and we are almost going to be complete the concept of asynchronous programming. Means what? Overall, the things which are required to develop any kind of web and web API application, we have already learned, right? So yes, something is there, how to use entity framework, right? How to use ADO.NET. These things are also mandatory things which are we are going to learn, right? But now you can start the developing understanding of web API project, right? So any question from anyone?
So one small doubt again, like here in this response, no, after HTTP get async method, you are awaiting for that call. So,
Yes,
so anyhow, till that method returns the like response, it is not going to execute the further statements there. But still,
yes,
you are calling await on response.content.read async. So that I
yes.
did.
See why I'm calling this. You just tell me why I'm calling this await operator here.
Await means it will wait till that to get the response. It will wait, and that thread will again give back to the main.
Exactly. See, in this case, again, I'm calling it async method. So what is this? This is a async method or not?
Async method, yeah.
Right? And if this content, right, whatever the content, if it's a huge content, right, in this case I'm getting a single content. Sometimes you will get 1 lakh of records. And to read those 1 lakh of records, right, it is going to take some time. And that time I don't want to block my main thread,
Okay.
right? And for that purpose, I'm using the await operator, right? So if this to read the content from the response, if it is taking 2 seconds, 3 seconds, I don't want to block my main thread. For that purpose, I'm using await operator here,
Oh,
right? So see, once you understand the await operator, the thing is, see, in this case, I'm calling a method. In this case, also I'm calling one async method. Right? This is also async method, na? If you go to the definition, right, then you will see it is also returning what? Task of a string. Task means what? Asynchronous representation. In this case, get async, right? If you go to the this, it is also returning me a task, right? So there is no difference between this and this. In this case, it is calling one API. In this case, this is also another method. And this method is going to return the content, right? Whatever available here. It is read the content, all the content, and then it is going to return me the string. Clear?
yes. So in general, like for all the async methods which are returning us a task, then it is advised to use await method there.
Yes, exactly. Await. Await means, see, you need to use await operator, but if you want the response, right? If you want the response, you need to use the await operator. If you are not interested what this method is going to return, I'm not interested at all. I just need to call the method, that's it. Whether the method execution completed successfully or execution failed, I don't care. Then in that case, you do not need to use the await operator. You just need to call the method and that's it.
Okay.
See, await of means what? Await means this method execution is going to take some time, and within that time period, I don't want to block my main thread. I just want to release the main thread so that I'm using await operator. As I'm using await operator, it will wait till the method execution completed to execute the further statement. But if I don't want to if I don't want this method to be completed to execute the further statement, if you do not want to end wait, then why you are going to use the await? Then in that case, you simply need to go further by removing the await keyword. Clear?
Yes.
Right. Now we are going to discuss something important, right? Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, right? As I mentioned earlier, it is very difficult, right? It is not possible to debug the async method, right? It is not possible or it is very difficult to debug the async method. Then what you need to do? Suppose you develop one application, you develop one async method, right? And you want to mock that async method. You want to unit test that async method, right? Whether the async method what I have created is working fine or not. If whatever the output input I'm providing, I'm getting the appropriate output or not, right? If the async method with return is working fine or not, without return value it working fine or not, right? If the exception is throwing, right, whether that exception is going to be handled by the caller method or not, if everything is working fine or not, right, then then in that case, how you can mock this, how you can unit test this thing? You cannot unit test using the unit test, you cannot unit test this async method, right? And for that, what you need to do is you have to implement the asynchronous method in a synchronous way. Asynchronous method in a synchronous way, what it means? It means, see, it means the method is going to return a task. The method is going to return a task, but without using the async keyword. But now if you look at any method, right? Right? I'm creating one method, public, static. I'm using async. I'm using a task. I'm giving the method name as method one, right? And within this method, I'm using some code, right? So some code means I'm using a task. dot delay, and I'm delaying the execution for some seconds, right? And here I'm using the await operator. So this is what we know. In this case, I have used the task, I have used this task, right, as the return type only because of the async keyword. If I remove the async keyword, then can I use the task? If I remove the async keyword, can I use the task?
No.
No. That means what? Task and task of T, right? What is provided by us to implement asynchronous programming only going to be used in the content of asynchronous method. If your method is async, then you can use a task or a task of a T. So in this case, I can use task of a string, and here from this method, I can return a string, something like this, right? I can return a string from here. But what is my requirement? If I use this async method, then I cannot unit test that method, right? But if I'm not doing the unit testing, right? Then how I can make sure that my method is working fine? How I can make sure the method with return, the asynchronous method with return type, the asynchronous method without return type, the asynchronous method with exception, right? How I can make sure the method is working fine, right? So basically what we need to do is we need to develop one synchronous method, but using the task, right? So in this case, async is just a mechanism to implement asynchronous programming, but all these things is going to be handled by the task class. So if I'm throwing some exception, that exception will be wrapped inside the task. And again, it will be unwrapped from the method, right? Where you are calling by using the await keyword, right? So for example, if I'm calling this method here, right? If I'm calling this method here, so method one, I can call here, right? I can call this method one here, right? And I can call this method here. I can use the await keyword here. And whatever this method returning, I can store that response inside this response variable. So in this case, right? In this case, whatever the data I'm returning, that the data is wrapped inside the task or not? Am I returning the string directly or I'm returning the task of a string?
Task of string.
Task of string means that string is wrapped inside the task. And whenever I'm returning, whenever I'm getting the data, right? Basically, what I'm doing here, I'm unwrapping the task. And how I can unwrap? By using the await keyword. If I'm using await keyword, then in that case, whatever this task is returning, from that task, I am unwrapping the message, and that message is going to store here. Even though if some exception is thrown from this task block, right, that exception is opposed. Suppose I'm throwing here, right, throw new application exception, some exception I throw here, right? So if I'm throwing some exception, so this exception object, right, whatever I'm throwing, that will be wrapped inside this task, and that will be unwrapped when I'm using the await operator. So in the previous session, right, I have told you, if I'm not using the await operator, right, if any exception is thrown, then also that exception is not going to be managed by the application, right? For example, let me implement the try catch block. All right, let me implement this method here, right? And here what I'm writing, I'm just printing the response, right? And here what I'm trying to do, I'm just printing Exception ex, I'm writing ex dot message, right? So in this case, what is going to happening, right? So this is my sum method. I'm calling the sum method from here. So let me remove these things, right? So in this case, try to observe this thing. This is very important. So in this case, I'm calling the sum method. Sum method calling method one. Method one is returning a task of a t. And this task of t, it is going to unwrap here. This task of t is going to unwrap here only when we use the await keyword. That means if I'm using the await keyword, then whatever it return from the task, that is going to be unwrapped here. And in this case, what data I'm returning a string. That string is going to be stored inside this variable, and that is going to be printed in the console, right? Right, high you can see, right? Now what I'm trying to do, I'm throwing some exception. So if I'm throwing the exception, right, that exception is going to be unwrapped here only as I'm using the await keyword. From this task, whatever exception I'm throwing, that will be unwrapped, and again that exception will be thrown from here, which is going to be cached by the cache block. So in this case, you will see error in the application. See, application exception we have thrown. That means what? Now, whenever I am returning anything, right, as part of a task, then that I can see if I am sending anything, right, then that information will be wrapped inside the task and will be unwrapped when you are using the await keyword, right? See, in this case, I'm not using the await keyword, I'm calling the method, right? So in this case, if I'm not using the await keyword and calling the method, right? So in this case, you can see I have written some statement here, right? I have written some statement here, completed, done. So in this case, you can see as I have not wrapped the method, right? I have not used the await keyword, means whatever the task this method is returning, that will not be unwrapped here. As it is not unwrapped, right? What it means after calling this method, it will not wait the method to be complete its execution. It will proceed. So in that case, even though your method is throwing some exception, you can this exception will not be get here. Why? Because you are not unwrapping the task, right? Let me run the application. See, you are getting the done. Even though your application throwing some exception, this exception information is unable to handle here. So basically, if you are using a task, right, then whatever method you are returning, right, those data will be wrapped inside the task, and again it is going to unwrap when you are going to use the await keyword. So now I'm using the await keyword. Now let me run the application. See, now as I'm using the unwrap, right, as I'm unwrapping using the await keyword, you can see I'm getting the error. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
So if we don't mention the await keyword, it will not return anything in the method calling, is it? Or it will return
Exactly.
error
If
too?
you are not using the await keyword, that means it simply call the method and it will continue its execution. It doesn't care. Now it will the main thread which is calling this method. Now it does not care whether this method is completed successfully or whether this method is throwing some error, right? Now it is not care. It doesn't care. So it simply call the method and it will continue its execution.
So it will not return the task of string also in that case?
Obviously, yeah, how it is going to return, because you are not awaiting the. If you are using the await keyword, then it is going to unwrap the thing. Whatever this task return, that will be unwrapped when you are using the await keyword. If you are not using the await keyword, then simply what it means? It means it is not unwrapping the things. If it is not unwrapping the things, means what? Or this method is returning string, exception, anything. It doesn't care. It simply proceed and move on, and it will continue the execution of the method, right? It doesn't care what is happening inside this method, because you are not waiting till the method execution is completed or not. Clear? Okay. So basically what I am trying to tell you is, if you are having one async method, then only you are returning a string. If you do not have any async method, right, then you cannot return a string, right? For example, right? For example, if I'm removing this async keyword, then you cannot use this task, right? If you cannot use this task, then how you can implement this? How you can test this, right? So basically, my intention is, but if I'm using async method, then that is fine. But the problem is that I cannot unit test this. I want to unit test this, but that means what? Now, if you want to unit test this, first of all, you need to remove this async keyword. But after removing this async keyword, but I want this task, because I'm going to check whether the task, whatever the data I'm wrapping inside the task, whether I'm getting or not. Whatever the if I'm going to test a task without value, task with value, task with some exception. I'm going to test those things, but without using the asynchronous methods. Right? Trying to understand. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So what exactly it means? It means I'm going to create a synchronous method, but by using this task first. I want to create a synchronous method, right? If you are using async, then it is going to be an asynchronous method. But I want to create a synchronous method, but by using task, right? So whatever the operation I'm performing using a task, those operation I want to perform, but in a synchronous manner, right? This functionality is not possible earlier, right? But from .NET Framework 4.6 till 4.8 and all versions of .NET Core, now it is possible to do this kind of operations, right? So what exactly? Now there will be occasion when you will have a method with an asynchronous signature that is return a task, but its implementation will be synchronous. And but its implementation will be synchronous. So first of all, you need to understand two terms. Both are not same. Synchronous and asynchronous, right? As of now, if your method signature contains the async keyword, then that method is going to be synchronous. And if the method signature does not contain the synchronous keyword, then it is going to be asynchronous. It is going to be synchronous, right? If your method contains the asynchronous signature, that means if your method contains the async keyword, means what? It can return a task, right? If your method contains the async keyword, then it can return a task. If it does not contain the async keyword, then it cannot return a task. That is what we have seen. If your method signature contains the async keyword, then it can return a task. If it does not contain the async keyword, then it is not going to return a task. So in that case, you will get some error, right? So what is my intention is, I want this asynchronous signature, means what? I do not want to use this async keyword, but I want to return a task, but that implementation is going to be synchronous. And one reason for this is unit test, right? Whenever you are performing unit test to check whether the operations, whatever you are implementing, right, they are working fine or not. In that case, you need to use unit test, right? And for that purpose, right, we are going to use auxiliary methods. And what are the methods and the properties they are provided? They have provided one property called completed task. One property they have provided is FromResult, and one property they have provided, sorry, this is a method from result, this is a method, and this is another method, and this is a property, right? With task.completed_task property, we can implement a method that return a task, but that is synchronous, right? Using this task.completed_task property, you can implement one synchronous method which is going to return a task. Using this task.FromResult method, we can implement one synchronous method which is going to return task of T. Using task dot exception, right? We can implement a synchronous method which is going to return a task with error, right? So the point that you need to remember is these things are only available in from .NET Framework 4.6, right? Let me remove this is not required, right? These things are available from .NET Framework 4.6 and .NET Core, right? Syntax to use, how to use task.completed property, right? First of all, your signature should not have the async keyword. Now, if you look at the signature, async keyword is not there, but this method returning a task. And if you want to create a synchronous method which is going to return a task, then you need to use task.completed task property. See, I'm writing return task.completed task. So in this case, this method is going to be synchronous, which is going to return a task. Task dot from result means what? Now, whenever your method going to return some value, right? And if you want that value to be wrapped inside a task of T, then you need to use from result, right? You can see this is a synchronous method. Why? Because the async keyword is not there, but this synchronous method returning a task of a string, and this is only possible by using task dot from result. So here you can see task dot from result. Whatever value you want to return, that you need to put inside this from result method. How to use task dot from exception? That means whenever your method going to return, right, some task, but with some exception, then in that case, right, you need to use this from exception, right? You can see this method returning a task, but in this case, this method is going to return one exception. And how you can make sure this method is going to return an exception, right? You have to use a task dot from exception, and to this from exception method, you need to pass the exception object, right? Right. So this is useful when you have unit test and you want to make sure that method handle task with the exception, right? So suppose so basically your method, right, going to return some data, right? In that case, you will use task dot this property, right? If your async method is returning, it does not return any data, right? Then in that case, you have to use task dot completed task, right? See, return task dot completed task. If your method, right, a synchronous method returning some result, right? Then in that case, right, you have to use a task of T. In this case, whatever type of data you want to return, that you need to specify here, and then you have to use task dot from result method. If your asynchronous method throwing some exception, if you want to test that scenario, then you have to use task dot from exception. And to this exception object, right, you need to pass the object, right, exception object that you want to throw from this method. But here you can see every method is having the return type as a task or a task of a string, but without using the async keyword. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right now, let me do this copy paste. And guys, please try to understand some unit testing framework, right? Unit testing is very, very important, right, for development. For if you are going to work with any kind of real-time application, right? Unit testing is must. For small companies, right? They are not bothering about unit testing, but if you are going to work for bigger companies, MNCs, right? Unit testing is the mandatory thing, right? So what I have done here is to test the three different scenarios. I have created three methods, and I'm just calling those methods from my main method. So this is scenario one. Here I'm going to return a task in in synchronous manner, right? So synchronous manner means this method does not have the return type async. I'm not creating this method as async by using the async keyword. So if you are not using async keyword, means it is a synchronous method, but this synchronous method returning me a task, right? And how you can return a task, right? So by using the task dot is completed task property, right? And this is only available from .NET Framework 4.6, right? And then here you can see I'm creating a method, right? Which is going to return task of a string, but without using async. And this is possible because of task dot form result. To this method, I have to pass the value what is I'm going to return, right? And if you want to use this version, right, if you want to throw the exception, right, then you have to use from exception. And to this from exception, you need to call, you need to pass this exception object, right? Now I'm calling these three methods, right? I'm not handling this exception. If you want to handle, then you can write the try catch block here, right? If you want to handle exception, you have to write the try catch block here. Right? So let me run the application. Right? So you can see some method executing, it does not return anything, it return a string, it will throw an exception, right? So in this way, right, you can use term, I mean, you can use unit text and you can check whether the methods, right, are working fine or not, right? As I mentioned, this is available from .NET Framework 4.6, right? If your application or if your project targeting a less version framework, then this is not going to be work. Suppose I'm using 4.5, right? So if I'm going to use 4.5, right, I changed the target framework 4.5. Now come to this place. See, now you can see this task dot is completed task. It is giving me some error, right? This method from exception, it is giving me some error, right? So basically what it means, now if you want to use this completed task from exception, right, then your .NET framework should target 4.6 or later, right? So what I have mentioned here, 4.6 or later, right? So now it is targeting 4.5, so I'm getting the error, right? Now I move it to 4.6, right? Let me move to 4.6. Set this one and come to this place, and you can see the error is gone. And if you are developing any .NET Core application, right, then it is going to work. But why? Because from Core 1.0, these things are available. Clear?
Yes.
Right. So this is how you need to unit test asynchronous method. Directly asynchronous method, you cannot unit text, and for that purpose you need to remove the async keyword, and then you have to use these things. If you are returning some data, you have to use this method, and if you are not returning some data, you have to, sorry, if you are not returning anything, you have to use completed task. If you are returning some data, you have to use FromResult, and if you are throwing some exception, you have to use this one, right?
So one question.
Yes.
So in this case, can we debug this using the debugger, or just it is with a
Yes, you can debug now. There is no issue. Why? Because these are synchronous method, right? Synchronous method means what? They are going to be executed one by one. There is no issue in debugging, right? So you can see my debugger point hit here. I'm pressing F10, F10, then the next method, right? Then the next method. You can debug this thing. There is no issue.
so this will not await.
No, here it is not going to be await. It is synchronous means synchronous. So this is the difference. Now synchronous means execution is going to be happen sequentially. In this case, there is no await, right? One thread is responsible for executing all application code.
So, but what if the like web API, if we are calling web API, if it taking more time, so will the application
See, for the web API calling purpose, you have to use async. What I'm saying here, you just want to make sure the method is working, and you have to implement a unit testing, right? Do you know what is unit test?
no, sir.
First of all, learn unit test, then you will understand this thing, right? So once you start developing, right, one method, two method, whatever method you developed in your application, you need to check each and every method with mock data. Mocking means, you know what is mocking means? You are not calling the actual API. You just need to give some input and you will get some output. Mocking means what? Some main database is there, some mock database is there. Instead of using the main database, you will use the mock database, right? And sometimes instead of calling the main API, you need to do some hard-coded thing, right? In that case, you need to use you. And in the case of a unit testing, you just need to check whatever the code I have written, that code is working fine or not, right? And this task and this task of string whatever completed, right? These are not for your development, right? Deployment purpose, right? This thing you should not write on your main code, right? You the method what you are going to implement is going to be async method, and this is only for a testing purpose,
Sir,
right?
in this case, for testing the existing method, which is an async method, we will be mocking the data which need to be go to the input. So in
Yes,
this method, we will be calling the main method, which is async method. Okay,
right.
that async method will be giving a result like maybe giving a task of string. So we will
Yes.
be getting task of string. So that value we will be how we will be doing that once
Sorry,
the result.
sorry. Can you repeat?
So when we call the actual method through the unit testing method,
So
suppose this
unit
sum method,
testing, see, you from your unit testing method, or why you are going to call the actual method?
then only we will get to know, right? Like actual
No,
method is
see, whatever your actual method body, and this method body, right? Body is going to be same. Whatever code you have written inside your async method, the same code you are going to written inside this mock method, right? But the difference is that in that case, you are not using async, right? In that case,
hmm,
you are using this non-async method, right? But the thing is that it is going to return a task. But in this case, the execution is going to be a synchronous manner, right?
okay.
You can debug the thing, you can check, right? Whether it is a asynchronous method or synchronous method. If the body is the same, means they are going to perform the same thing, right? So see, if these statements I have written here, this statement whether you written inside the asynchronous method or synchronous method, the execution, right, the meaning is going to be
Hmm.
same or different,
Yes, same.
right? So what is the advantages of using asynchronous method? Only one advantage. What advantages? I can use the await operator, which will release the main thread, right? But in
Yes.
this case, you cannot use the await operator, right? That means what? Then the same thread is going to execute the application code, right?
Okay.
In previous case, once you call the API, right? Once you call the API taking 5 seconds. And in that case, the thread will be released. But in this case, you are going to call the API, but in a synchronous manner,
Okay.
right? And in that case, it is not going to release the thread. It will wait till the response will come from the API,
Mm-hmm.
right? In previous case, what happened? You release the thread, right? The thread is going to do a different task. This is the reason why you cannot debug the things, na?
Hmm.
In this case, the thread is not going to be released. The same thread, which is calling the sum method to, the same thread is going to call the API. The same thread is also going to execute the main method, right?
Hmm.
Synchronous means what? The execution is going to happen synchronous. Synchronous means step by step, one by one. It is not possible that some method execution started and in between the some method to execution, it is going to main method and do some other task. This is not possible using synchronous. But
Hmm.
this is possible using asynchronous, right? This is the reason why we cannot debug the asynchronous method. And for that debugging purpose, for that testing purpose, right, we are using the same thing, that same task it is going to return, but in a synchronous manner. Synchronous means what? Now it is going to be executed step by step, right?
Okay.
Clear?
Yes, sir. Because in our application we used to call main method using mocking data, and we
Right?
will check.
Mocking data means, see, mocking data means what? Now, see, if you are developing this application, right, test application, then you just need to change the database now.
Yes.
So your actual database is, you may find, see, actual database is a different database. Mocking database is a different database. You just need to change the connection string. The working is going to be same.
Yes, but it will call the exact actual method, right? So
Right.
that's
See, it will call the actual method, then you cannot see. So again, I'm saying the same thing. If your actual method is an async method, then how you can
yes,
debug that
we
method,
can't do it. Yeah,
right?
understood, sir.
But if you change that async method to synchronous by using this thing, then you can debug na,
Yes,
right? This is the reason why I'm showing you this option. And this option is not available earlier. As I mentioned, from where this is available, from .NET Framework 4.6, right? If you are using some earlier .NET Framework like 4.5 or some 4.3, then in that case, this functionality is not available, right? It might be possible that when the application developed in your company, right, at that time, this concept is not available, so they have not used. But now this is available,
yes, sir. Got it.
right?
Sir, unit testing is not part of our syllabus.
No, unit testing is a very huge thing, right? Unit testing is not part of our syllabus. Because if I'm going to cover unit testing, then again it is going to take at least 2 weeks. And
So
already
do you
our
have
syllabus
that
is very huge.
in your website? Do you have the
No,
material for that?
no, right? But try to learn some unit test, right? You can easily log at lots of I mean videos, right? If you are going for website, right, then you cannot understand the things, right? Because this thing needs to be done practically. So try to see some videos on YouTube or Udemy, right? Because unit testing is important thing, right? Yes, for small companies, they do not provide that flexibility. But for big MNCs or MNCs, which is standard company, unit testing is mandatory, right? So unit testing means X unit, N unit, right? Those are the things. At least you learn these two things, X unit and N unit, right? So any question from anyone?
Uh, so just one thing, like, can we call the web API that you developed with this method and see the output, how it is coming? Yeah, how
Yes,
can we do
yes,
it?
yes, yes, absolutely. You can call. There is no issue, right? You can call, but for that purpose, you have to use the non-asynchronous version of the web API, right? Right? You can just try by yourself. Can you try that? I've already provided the code how to call the web API. Hello, Bhargav?
Uh, yes.
See, can you try that? Because I have already provided this method code, right? How to use a task and all these things, right? So what you need to do is you just need to do the implementation by yourself,
Okay, sir, I'll try.
right? Because see, every time you also need to do something different, right? So I have already shown you how to call the web API, how to develop web API, right? How to consume web API, right? I have shown you this thing. Now, if you want to mix both these things, right, then you can try it now from this method, right? Or from this method, you call the web API, get the response, right? Whatever response you got, right? Store inside this from result variable and see whether it is working fine or not, right? That's it for today, right? And the next class is on Monday. Any question from anyone?
So just one question, like you said, to call the web API from sync method, the web API should be synced. Am I correct? Or
See, I'm saying you now you have to call the sync version, right? So there are two types, right? If you go to the HTTP client, okay, See, you can see many things here, right? So, okay, forget about, I have written these things in my website. अरे ये क्या हो रहा है? Right? So you can use this one, na? Okay, let me show you these things. Where is, right? So I don't need cancellation token. Let me remove that one. I don't use this client, right? So I'm getting this error. I need to bring the namespace. Right? So, right? So here I'm using the get async method, right? I'm calling the API, and here I'm using if success, then this is the status code, and whatever the data, I'm reading the data, right? And if some error, then what is the error information? That is what I'm printing here, right? So from this method, if you want to return the data, right? Some value. So here I'm storing the data inside this sum value variable, right? And I'm returning the sum value, right? So now let me run the application. right? See, in this case, I'm debugging some value. Okay, so creating client result. So it is taking some time. How much time? It will take some more than 5 seconds to get the result, right? Once you get the result, this is the code, status code 200. So in this case, you are getting the output as a successful. Then what is the status code? It is, you are getting the status code as okay, write it down. And whatever result it return, that will be stored inside this some value, right? Hello, James. Welcome to Web API, right? And then what I'm trying to do, I'm just returning that data, right? And I'm printing that data, right? What data? Hello, James, welcome to this web API, right? Now you can see the rest of the code. Clear? So you can see, hello, James, welcome to web API. This is what we are returning from the API. That is what you can see here. So in this case, what is happening exactly? I'm calling the same method, right? Right, same async method, but in this case, what I'm calling the result properties after calling the method, right? So you can see previously I'm using the await keyword, and in this case I cannot use the await keyword. Why? Because this is not a synchronous method, right? This is not a synchronous method. And if you are sure why I'm changing the code, right? You can also use the same the code what is there in my previous application, right? Simply call this one, right? I'm also doing the same thing again. This is some method 2. Okay, let me do this in some method 1, right? So in this case, what I'm trying to do is, so this is my new URI. So you cannot use await operator. Well, can anybody tell me why I cannot use the await operator?
Because it is not sync.
Exactly. It is not an async method. You just need to remove the await keyword. And after removing the await keyword, what you need to do is you need to call the property called result, right? You need to call the result property. And here you need to call the result property, right? And in this case, name. So you can pass name means you know what this is a value. So I'm just passing Pranaya, right? That is fine, right? Any changes? You understand? Now you can do this. Markup, can you try
Yes.
this? Only see in previous example or the code what we have used, in that case, we are using the await operator, right? And in this example, you cannot use the await operator because the method is not an async. And if you want this get async method to run as a synchronous manner, then you need to call this result method, result property. And you need to call this result property, right? If you go to the result property, then you can see it is returning the result. It's a get property, get the result value of this task, right? From a task, if you want to get the result, then you have to call this property, right? Now let me convert this to task of string. Let me convert this to task of string, right? Okay, let put it as task, right? Let me copy this one, right? Let me put this inside this variable, right? Now, this is the task of string, right? Some value, I don't want to return this value. I'm going to store this value, right? What this method returning, I'm going to store, right? Here I'm return some value. See, so let me directly initialize this one, some value, right? Let me remove this thing, right? So now you can see the, now the whatever this method return, that is stored inside this variable, and that is what I'm passing here, right? Now when I call this some method 2, right, then this some method 2 is going to return what task? It is going to return a task of a string, and from the task I want the result. You just need to call the result property, and this result property is going to return what the task is returning. It is returning a string. That string is going to store inside this variable. Then you can check this one. Clear?
Yes.
But I'm not going to provide the code of this example. You have to try this one. Right? This is not a difficulty. Simply you have to remove the await keyword wherever I used. Instead of await keyword, you just need to call the result properties. That's it. And while calling the method, right? While calling the method, it is returning me some asynchronous task string, right? See, in this case, if I remove this one, now what is the type of this result? String result, right? I'm removing this one. What is the type now? It becomes task of a string,
Task of
right?
string.
And from this task of string, right, you want a result, then you can call this result property like this. This is also fine. Understand?
Yes.
Guys, understand what I'm doing here? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So it's a task. It's a task. You have to do this. Right, I'm not going to provide the example code, right? I'm not going to provide this example code. It's a task for you. You guys need to try, and in this case, no need to use the cancellation token, right? Don't pass the cancellation token, then also it is going to work, right? Cancellation token is not required. There is a async version which is only taking the URI, right? So in this case, you can see this is my URI, right? Even you can also use this version, right? How you can use this version? Now you have to create an instance of this one, right? Let me show you this thing, right? So new URI, and to this part message, what I can pass this thing. This is a string, so you have to put this thing inside the string bracket, right? So now you can comment this thing, right? So you can pass, you can also use this method, or you can also use this method. Now, no need to set the base address, because here in base address, we are creating an URI instance, and then I'm passing this REST parameter. But here directly I'm using the parameters, right? So you can use any of the version, right? You can use URI request URI or string URI. If you are using string URI, first in the base address, you need to set the base address using this instance, right? And then you need to pass the URI resource, right? I mean, what is the unique address? And directly you can pass one URI. That is also fine. Directly how you can pass? By creating an instance, you need to pass like this. So any approach you can use, you can use. Now, if you run the application, again, you are going to get the same output, right? Okay, no connection. Okay, so this application is stopped. No, application is still running. Okay. Can anybody tell me what is the issue? What is the port number in this where my service is running? What is the port number? 51546. And what is the port number I have specified here?
589.
So this is the reason why it is saying the actively the machine is unable to request, right? So basically you need to change the port number, right? So here you need to provide a port number. That means what? If your service is not running, right, then you cannot access the data, right? So now run the application. Right? Hello, Pranay. Welcome to Web API. Clear? Yes or no? How to call async? How to call this get async method in asynchronous manner and how to call this get async method using synchronous manner. Is that clear?
Yes.
Right. Now you have to do this by yourself. And not only this get async version, right? If you want to learn web API, right, then in that case you need to understand how to call put method, how to call post method, right, how to call delete method. And here I'm only showing you the example of a get method, right? So that's it for today. Still anybody having any question, they can ask me, otherwise we can close the session.
So when is your web API class going to start?
See, the web API class, again, I'm saying the OSP.NET web API, right? I'm not going to start any web API batch any soon, right? I'm going to start a .NET Core MVC and a .NET Core web API, right? Which is most probably after the end of this session, right? End of this course, right? Whatever course I'm taking now, advanced C# .NET in the morning, this current batch, once this batch is completed, then I'm going to start my .NET Core, because in the evening I'm taking my another C# batch, and in the morning I'm taking this batch. Once this batch completed, then I will start the .NET Core. And in that .NET Core, I'm going to cover .NET Core Basic, .NET Core MVC, .NET Core Web API, and Entity Framework Core. Right? But before that, if anyone interested, right, they can still start learning web API from my website, right? Everything I have specified in a step-by-step manner, right? From the introduction to everything, right? If you visit, right, this is one of the, I'm getting lots of feedback from this one, right? You can start developing. Everything is mentioned here, right? The theories, the interview questions, right? The concept, right? The examples, everything I have explained here. You can start developing, right? The advanced
Like,
concept is also there, right? Security, right? Authentication, right? What is authentication? Authorization, basic authentication, role-based authentication, web API service with basic authentication. What are message handler, right? Message basic authentication using message handler. What is client message handler? What is token-based authentication, right? People are using JWT authentication, right? That is nothing but your token-based authentication, right? How to generate a refresh token, how to generate consume refresh token, right? Then there is something called HMAC authentication, right? Something is missing in this session, that is encryption and decryption, right? Which is I'm not providing the document here, but very soon I'm going to provide that part. But apart from that, everything is there. Yeah, saying something.
so like this web API and core web API, is there any like
Both are
difference?
both are a difference in the sense work from the working point of view, they are going to be same, doing the same job, but from the development point of view, they are going to be different. This ASP.NET web API, right, what I'm showing here, this is using basically .NET framework, right? And this is ASP.NET core web API, right? What I have written here, right? This is basically targeting the .NET core framework, right? Targeting .NET Core framework. You can see I'm getting also some feedback. Right. So basically it's up to you. If you want to freshly start your career, then you can start with .NET Core. But most of the project which is already developed in the companies, right, they are developed using ASP.NET Web API. Anyone working with the ASP.NET Web API and the .NET Core Web API?
I work with ASP.NET Core.
ASP.NET Core, right?
Yeah, I work with that.
Yeah, so any new project, right? Those are going to be developed using a .NET Core Web API, right? Any existing project which already developed, developed in the sense from the last 2 years, 3 years, right? Then they might be use the ASP.NET Web API, right? But if you want to learn something new, then I would suggest to learn the .NET Core Web API.
Yeah.
Right, because .NET Core is the future, right? And what ASP.NET Web API and ASP.NET MVC, those are our old technologies, right? So we always need to upgrade ourselves to the latest and demanded technology, and this is one of the things. And recently C Sharp 11 is released. .NET 7 with C Sharp 11. Anyone try? Anyone check?
Yeah, I heard so like some of the mandatory properties or something like that.
Right?
Working
So
with-
just figure out what is new and what is I mean what changes they have done, right? So you can have a look, because as a developer you need to update yourself. 11th 8 2000 so you can see this is the binary in computer. So what are the things they have done, right? Download .NET 7. You can see this is the SDK ASP.NET Core runtime 7.0, right? .NET desktop runtime. So these are the things that is developed using yeah, I mean, this is the new release, but if you go to the MS10 document, I'm 100% not sure, but 50%, 60% I'm sure you will not understand what they are actually providing as part of a .NET 7. Because their documentation is not clearly, or their documentation is not proper, right? So definitely, some point of time, I'm going to take one class, right? And in that class, I'm going to explain .NET 7, right? What are .NET 7? What are the new features they are introduced as part of the .NET 7? I'm going to cover, right? That for sure. But
Well, as of .NET 6, there is no ASP anymore. There is only one .NET. They
yeah. So
put
not from .NET 6, right? So if
6.
you okay, so let me give you an overview of what is there, right? What is the latest framework of a .NET?
Well, I'm working with 6, but they already released 7, but I haven't started with 7 yet.
The
But with
latest one
6,
is
there is only one framework only. I mean,
yeah. So let me give one. Let me give you what is exactly the latest .NET framework is 4.8. Previous one is 4.7. Like this, right? That means which version they use in the latest? They use 4.x. Right? This is the latest .NET framework, right? And the
right.
.NET Core, right? .NET Core they start with the .NET Core 1.0, right?
Yeah.
They start then .NET Core 2.0.
Two.
They
Yeah, the
start
3.
.NET Core 3.0, right? And then
Then I went to
no,
6, I think.
right? No .NET Core 4.x. There is no .NET Core 4.x. 4.
No.
Is there? No, right? Then they start .NET 5, .NET
Yeah.
6, and now
Right.
it is .NET 7. Why they removed to .NET Core 4.0? They see initially it is a .NET framework. Later they make it as a .NET Core framework, and then they thought, let us merge these two things. No .NET framework, no .NET Core, simply only .NET. And because of that, they are planning to use .NET, right? The .NET Core 3.0. The next version they thought, okay, now we are going to remove the name core from the .NET, right? So they're trying to use this one, .NET Core, right? The next version of .NET Core 3.0 is going to be .NET 4, but already they are having .NET Framework 4.x.
Yeah, it was
They
a
thought
mess.
that, yeah, they thought that people will get confused. What is .NET Framework 4.x and what is .NET 4.x? And people are not getting confused, and this is the reason why they simply remove .NET Core 4.0, right? 4.x, and the next version of .NET 3.0 is going to be .NET 5. And because of this reason, people not to confuse between .NET and .NET Framework, they simply removed this 4.x, because .NET Framework already 4.1. If people know that .NET and .NET Framework, they are thinking both are same. So if they are using .NET Framework 4.1, and if they are using .NET 4.1, some people will think that both are same. But in reality, .NET Framework and .NET, right, both are a different thing. And this is the reason why they simply remove this .NET 4.x and start from .NET 5. Right? right? So if you go to their official .NET framework, right? So you can see this is the latest 4.8.1, but this is the recommended one, right? This is the latest. See, currently what version is introduced? .NET 7, right? And previously it is .NET 6.0. And this .NET 6.0 providing LTS, long-term support. But this is a recommended standard term support. They have not given any long-term support for this one. This is just for recommended, but this is the LTS, right? If you want to develop application, you should follow this thing blindly because they are going to provide support for a longer period of time, but they have not any longer period of support for this one, right? So you can see, right? So this is the thing, right? So, okay, let me open you. Right? So this is the .NET framework. And if you want to learn, so this is a free cross-platform open source developer platform for building and developing different types of applications, right? So this is the new and latest .NET framework, right? So you should choose this one, right? So you can see this is now the .NET. There is, see, you can see what they are saying .NET. They are not saying .NET framework, right? Or you can say they are not saying .NET Core. They are simply saying .NET.
.NET, that's it.
Right? That's it. So don't confuse between the .NET and the .NET Core, right? Both are going to be same. .NET is the alternative name for .NET Core, right?
And the Visual Studio 2022, it's working with .NET 6 and C# 10, which
Right.
is, both of them are long term, so it's best to work with that, not being experimental.
Right. So basically Visual Studio 2022 supported .NET Core, and it is going to be, I mean, it is going to be, if you want to develop any .NET C# 10 application, then mandatory Visual Studio 2022 should be there, right? And C# 10 means you cannot develop such application using your .NET framework. .NET framework not supported those things. Whatever 4.8 till then, right? If you have a look, right? Introduction to, right? See, if you have gone through this thing, right? For C# 7 and C# 6.0, right? The .NET framework 4.6, C# 7, right? C# 8, right? After then, right? From C# 9.0, .NET 5 is there, right? From C# 10, .NET 6 is there, and this is providing
it's a long-time service, right?
long-term support, right?
Right.
And for developing C# 10.0 application, at least Visual Studio 2022 is required. And for developing C# 9 application, at least Visual Studio 2019 is required. And here it is coming with .NET 5, right? If you want to develop, then you have to use this one, right?
I understand it's better to go for a long time support because
Obviously,
otherwise
you should go with, right, whatever, say, if you are going to develop any .NET Core application, right, they are showing, right, .NET Core means you have to use 2022, right? And when you are going to develop .NET Core application, they are showing what are the supports they are provided for which version, right? Let me create a new application and show you these things. Suppose I'm going to develop, see, you can see a project for create a command that can run on .NET. .NET means .NET Core on Windows, Linux, and Mac operating system, right? So I'm
Uh-huh.
one application, right? While I'm developing one application, they are providing, right? What are the supports 2.1, 3.1, 5, 6. I have not installed 7.0, so you can see .NET Framework 7.0 is not showing here. And what are the 2.1 is out of a support. 5.0 is out of a support. If you want to develop, you can use 3.1 or you can use 6.0 because they are providing support for these two, right? And see, previously .NET Core, they are saying .NET Core, they are saying .NET Core 3.1. But after then, from there is no 4.0 or 4.x. Directly .NET 5.0, .NET 6.0. The core word they have removed from 5. But this .NET 5.0 is the higher version of .NET Core, or it is the next version of .NET Core 3.1. Clear?
Yeah, it's okay.
Right. Right. So, right. So whatever the features which are introduced as part of C# 10, if you want, then you can only develop or use using Visual Studio 2022. This is not possible using this. But whatever available in this .NET 5, you can use, those are using Visual Studio 2020. That is possible. But higher to lower not possible. Lower to higher is possible. Right. That's it for guys today. Thank you. Thank you for giving your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.